If you ever try to get your finances in order, chances are you failed. A lot. And you probably convinced yourself that it's because you're too lazy, undisciplined, or unmotivated. But the truth is, it's not you. What most people don't realize is that when it comes to finances, the system is rigged, and you're being programmed to stay poor. When it comes to people, everyone believes they have the ability to choose what they do, think, or feel, but that's not entirely true. The human brain is just hardware, and the mind is software, an operating system that's programmed by our experiences and observations that lead to our thoughts and actions. Like if you believe the earth is flat, prefer to eat with chopsticks, or love K-pop even though you have no idea what they're saying. In sociology, they call it socialization. Basically, when we're born, our mind is like a brand new computer, and over time, it undergoes two stages that shape our future. The first stage is primary socialization, which starts the first time we interact with another person, our parents, family, and community. It's where we learn our foundational norms, values, and behaviors. Shoes on or off in the house, dogs are good or bad, save money or blow it all on a new TV. After we get exposed to institutions like school, media, and the government, we simultaneously enter the second stage, secondary socialization, where we learn the universal norms, values, and behaviors in our society. At home, you're only judged by the standards of your family, but at school, you'll be judged by the standards of your society. By the way, if you want to build a wealthier and healthier life, sign up for my free weekly newsletter, Rethinkable, link below. But the problem is, what if they're all wrong? What if what we learn from our parents, school, and the media is exactly what's programming us to stay poor in the first place? Most of us learned about money from our parents and community. So if our parents and friends were poor and didn't know how to escape poverty, then chances are this is the reality that you know. And all the norms, behaviors, and values from these people seeped into your subconscious, which shape your mind today. Columbia University found that children who grew up poor were not only more likely to experience poverty as adults, but the likelihood of being poor in adulthood increases with the number of years spent in poverty as a child. That's why pro NFL athletes who made tens of millions of dollars, 78% of them who retire will file for bankruptcy in 2 years. More than half of all NFL players come from a country with a poverty rate higher than the national average, meaning most of them have already been subconsciously programmed into the poverty trap. Alright, so I know this is pretty depressing, but there is a bright side, because all it takes is one individual, one person in your family to understand the truth and break the poverty programming trap. And that one person is you. And the first place to start is by understanding our education system. But first, I want to talk about something personal. Like many of you, I didn't grow up with money, and my parents were super frugal. Like they would intentionally buy clothes that were too big so that I can still wear them years later. And naturally, kids at school would make fun of me. And I realized that growing up without money, you build up a lot of financial baggage and emotional trauma that negatively impacts you later in life. And what I think is really helpful for this is therapy, which can give you the strategies to work through all this baggage and trauma. And that's why I'm excited to talk about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and accessible. I don't know about you, but finding a therapist can be tough, especially when you're limited to options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist a lot easier because it's online, it's remote. And by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. Check out the link down below. It's betterhelp.com/Vincent Chan. Clicking that link supports the channel, but more importantly, it gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp so you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. And because finding a therapist is a little like dating, if you guys don't mesh, which is actually pretty common, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. So if you ever went through or are going through a hard time, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/Vincent Chan. And thanks again to BetterHelp for supporting this video. Alright, so our education system is relatively new, just 200 years old. During the Industrial Revolution, Horace Mann birthed the education system as we know it today. It was modeled off the concept of Prussian factory schools that were designed to squash individualism and promote obedience to the state. Today, that education system has taken on a life of its own. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, people were mostly artisans and farmers who worked out of their homes and were pretty much their own bosses for generations. When factories were built to manufacture stuff like cloth, clocks, and magic lamps, factory owners needed workers, but it was tough to find and manage them. So they built factory schools to produce compliant, timely, and literate workers who kept their heads down and minimized mistakes and failures. The new generation was programmed with these objectives. Workers straight from school who were taught to play the game of life by thinking inside the box and to avoid mistakes and failures. The perfect cog to jam into an industrial machine. Rich people play the game of life to win, but poor people play the game of life to not lose. And this is where some of the best opportunities are automatically eliminated in your mind because you're now programmed to think in the negative and reactive. If you invest money in the stock market, you might lose it. Real estate, you might lose it. Start a business, you might lose it. If you're playing the game of life to not lose, you're gonna avoid all three things. But unfortunately, you're gonna be suffering a much worse loss. The loss of opportunity to build wealth. When it comes to doing well financially, the most important aspect of it, financial education, isn't even taught in schools. You might not notice the consequences right away. You happily swipe your credit cards, take out loans, and buy things you can't afford to impress people you don't care about. But soon, they'll start to catch up. One day, you'll open your bank account and see you're thousands in debt, desperately dependent on your employer and struggling to pay your bills. Nearly 85% of Americans believe schools should teach financial literacy, especially since 58% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck and 70% feel financially stressed. So why isn't it taught? One main problem is teachers don't feel qualified to teach it, either because they don't know anything about it or they're struggling with financial literacy themselves. It's a catch-22. So here we come full circle. But the reality is, if you continue to blindly follow the poverty programming trap, hoping that you'll eventually build wealth, you're only going to be frustrated, discouraged, and burnt out. When it comes to understanding how people actually become wealthy, most people get it wrong. Chances are you were taught to follow the typical path to succeed. Go to school, study hard, get good grades, and find a good job. There's nothing inherently wrong with this path, but you won't build true wealth from it. The reality is, few people become millionaires from just a salary. Here's why. People typically measure value based on time worked. It's why we think of wages and income on a per-hour basis. If you're $100 short for a PS5, you'll pick up more hours at work. If you can't cover rent, you'll pick up another shift. But it's exactly this time-money equation that brainwashes us. Even if you work 24 hours a day for $20 an hour, sure, you'll make a little bit more, but it's not sustainable. Similarly, focusing on saving every little penny you can isn't the solution either. There's only so much you can cut from your expenses. Breakfast? Beans. Lunch? Beans. Dinner? Beans. Warren Buffett said that 3 things helped him become rich: being in America, good genes, and compound interest. Wealth isn't created from saving or trading more of your time for money. It's created by leveraging assets and compound interest. The richest millionaires didn't just sit on their salaries. They channeled their money, skills, and connections into opportunities and investments that brought them a return on investment in multiples of what they put in. When it comes to investing, nothing is guaranteed. But what we do know is that over the course of a long period of time, 30, 40, 50 years, the stock market tends to return about 9 to 10% per year. What that means is that your money will essentially double every 10 years, even if you do nothing. If you invest $6,000 a year from 25 to 65 at an annual return of 10%, you're gonna end up with a total of over $2.7 million. If you choose not to invest and instead keep the money under your mattress, you'll end up with a total of $240,000. That's a difference that can easily change your life. But even if you don't have a family fortune from a Zambian emerald mine like Elon Musk, investing doesn't just mean stashing tens of thousands of dollars away in the stock market or real estate. If you don't have money to invest in bigger assets, investing in your skills is the best place to start. Picking up a $20 hour job or third shift might seem like a decent short-term solution, but the better long-term solution is putting your money into the right education, information, tools, and resources to improve or learn new skills that other people want. I've witnessed it firsthand. The more I learn and upskill, the more income I earn, the more confident I feel, and the more freedom I create for myself. One of the first things I ever invested in was a course on how to edit videos. I had just made a little bit of money from creating content, and I knew I wanted to improve my videos for all of you, and it paid back in dividends. But other than understanding how to actually build wealth, there's something else that happens every day that constantly reprograms us to stay poor. In the 1800s, the average person spent 80% of their income on necessities like food and housing, which left little room for other stuff, like films, toys, and Mr. Magic lamps. The problem was, thanks to the Industrial Revolution, factories were creating a ton of new stuff that no one was buying. Typically, with supply and demand, when supply exceeds the demand for something, the price of that something falls, or the supplier produces less of it. But factory owners didn't want to do either, so they hired someone to reprogram everyone's mind. Walter Scott was one of the first to combine psychology and advertising because he wanted consumers to want to buy new things. Prior to him, advertisers focused on simply making people aware of their products and features, but Scott transformed advertising by focusing on emotions. Instead of saying Listerine was an antiseptic liquid to kill bacteria, they sold you on the fear of bad breath. Instead of Quaker Oats talking about how healthy and good they are for you, they focused on the fear of going hungry. Febreze targeted the fear of clothes smelling bad, Coca-Cola targeted your happiest memories. And today, that approach to advertising has taken on a life of its own. TV shows, movies, billboards are filled with the next hottest products that you absolutely need to buy. Whether it's the newest smartwatch or the newest iPhone that's exactly like the last two, there are endless ways to spend your money. Walter Scott said, "Man has been called the reasoning animal, but he could with greater truthfulness be called the creature of suggestion." And I'm guilty of falling for this too. I'm taking a look around my living room and I'm thinking, what do I actually need? A couch, a table, some lights maybe? But chances are, your place is way more cluttered than that. There's a PS5, a TV against the wall, a smart speaker, a vacuum cleaner, and whatever that is. And social media has only made this worse. Our feeds are filled with reminders that everyone else is living their best lives. Did Samantha just travel to Bali? Did John just get a Rolex? I can't believe he has a Mr. Magic lamp. And subconsciously, our desire to present our lives as perfect becomes free advertising for those companies. It's gotten so bad that brands have become a part of who we are. Economists call this the commodity self. Basically, when people start to form their identities around a brand. Are you a PC or Mac user? Coke or Pepsi? Tesla or Honda? Nearly 90% of millennials say social media creates a tendency for them to compare their own wealth or lifestyle to that of their peers. As a result, 57% say they spent money they hadn't planned to spend. But just because you've been programmed already doesn't mean you can't change. Just like computers, you can do a complete reset. And I'll tell you exactly how I did it. Chances are you say the words, I can't afford it, I can't do that, I can't do this. Sometimes it's reasonable, but oftentimes it's an easy escape with terrible unintentional consequences. Starting any sentence with the words I can't is like a button that immediately shuts your brain down. It's two easy words we default to because it makes it so you don't have to think about the issue anymore. Because you said it yourself, there is no alternative path. The consequence is that you consciously submit to defeat, you limit your abilities, and you never bother to find another solution. Instead of saying, I can't, you should say, how can? How can I afford it? How can I do that? It's a subtle difference in wording, but by asking the question, it forces you to open your brain and actively search for answers and opportunities. But to really reprogram your mind, you need to know the truth. And the best place to start is by discovering why millennials and Gen Z are the poorest generations. Click here to learn why it's so much harder to build wealth than ever before.